Hi guys, welcome to some quick points. If you are studying Macbeth, I'm going to look at is this a dagger speech, which you can find a video on my YouTube channel for and on my Instagram if you scroll, and just how we would take that and move around the play. The reason I'm doing that again is because in my experience, students are using references from that section, is this a dagger, and they can't really analyse it well and or move around the play. So what I'm going to do is show you just how we can use single words from that speech by Macbeth, Act 2, Scene 1, and be able to move around and bring in other things such as the witches and Lady Macbeth. So within this section, Macbeth says about obviously the hallucination. He says that it's a dagger of the mind, a false creation. Look at Shakespeare's punctuation there as well, guys. We know we can reference the iambic pentameter here, and interestingly, the iambic pentameter for me in this speech does a couple of things. One is Macbeth, obviously here, he's trying to make this difficult decision about whether or not he should commit regicide. And the iambic pentameter, this unstressed, stressed syllable, unstressed, stressed syllable count, kind of signifies the notion that he is confused and conflicted between committing the regicide and not, being immoral and being moral, being good versus bad, heaven, hell, which is referenced at the end of the section. And what we can then do is bring in the goddess of the witches, and I never pronounce her name right, but she is mentioned in this speech as well, which is Hecate or Hecate, however you want to pronounce it, and she's brought into the play later on in Act 4. And not only, and again it's on my Instagram, it's on my YouTube, is she the goddess of the witches, but she is the goddess of crossroads, a crossroads. So if we are talking about Act 2, Scene 1, the decision that Macbeth has got to make, and we've got this crossroads of shall I kill the king or shall I not? Shall I abide by God's great chain of being, or shall I defy it and usurp with the king? Then again, it's perfectly placed. We are obviously aware when Act 2, Scene 2 begins that he has chosen the wrong path, albeit you might argue influenced by the witches, influenced by Lady Macbeth, fate, whatever you want, whichever way you look at it. Our tragic hero has unfortunately brought about the chain of events, which is obviously the peripeteia if you are doing Greek tragedy, and Aristotle, and the reversal of his fortune. If I just go back up to what I was saying about a dagger of the mind, pause, a false creation. That pause, a dagger of the mind, is reminding us about one theory which is Carl Jung in terms of psychology, the shadow, that part of our brain that exists, the dark part of our brain. And the psychological argument is that everybody has it. And I suppose there's an argument that the more we suppress it, the fact that it becomes stronger, isn't it? And it comes out roaring, if you like. And Macbeth suppresses this ambition, doesn't he, until it's there in front of him. So this pause, a dagger of the mind, a false creation, is huge by Macbeth. If you are looking at a grade 9, or if you are doing this at A level, please check out my other video, because I talk about the trochaic inversion within this speech. And the trochaic inversion, guys, so you've got the iambic pentameter, but the trochaic inversion places stress in just a separate section of the speech. And again, your inversion is Shakespeare playing with where he stresses and magnifies particular words. This idea as well of a dagger of the mind is fabulous for us, because if we are moving around the play concisely and effectively, then a dagger of the mind later on in Act 3, full of scorpions is my mind. So the dagger, we can argue obviously a dagger is sharp, it hurts. If it's in his brain, it then becomes this full-blown hallucination, and he follows it to the king's chamber to kill the king. It is plaguing his mentality, his thoughts, his black and deep desires, which again we can reference at the start of the play. So we're moving around really effectively. And the dagger that's hurting Macbeth develops to become, full of scorpions is my mind. And we know what the scorpion does, it's venomous. So it's poisoned, which we can then go back to Lady Macbeth's opening and talk about the Gaul reference and chastise with the valour of my tongue, and all of the references to poison that she gives us. And again, this idea that they almost infect him to a certain extent, if you're going to argue the power of and the influence of Lady Macbeth and the witches. So again, you could argue that, you know, his mentality digresses, and of course it does, from our brave soldier to our dead butcher, if you like. The other thing about this section, when he says wicked dreams abuse, and we're moving around the play, wicked, something wicked this way comes. Fast forwards in Act 4. So not only is the word wicked synonymous with evil, we know that it comes from root word wicken, which is again linked to the root word witch. So they are embedded within his mentality, are the witches. And also you can talk about the idea here of when the witches say something wicked this way comes, they are talking about Macbeth, but they don't recognise him. So they say he's a thing. And when they say that he's wicked, look what has happened. They take away his humanity by calling him a thing, which is really interesting, because after the murder, he refers to himself in the third person. He says, Macbeth doth murder sleep. Now, it's as if he doesn't recognise himself, so he steps almost outside of himself and says Macbeth. It's not often we talk about ourselves in the third person like that. And then the witches argue that something wicked this way comes, as if they don't know it's him, that they aren't even aware of what they've caused, because at the start of the play, they were waiting for Macbeth on the heath. Yeah, so it's almost as if their little game and their puppetry has almost backfired to a certain extent. We can analyse abuse as well, because we can just take literal meaning of abuse there. Talk about corrupting someone, manipulating someone, hurting someone. If it's abuse, it's probably going to be traumatic as well. The trauma, I suppose, in terms of Macbeth, is that he goes on to become murderous, if you like, and the aftermath of that. Also within the speech, as I say, we get the juxtaposition of heaven and hell, and what's interesting is that we end on the word hell. So that is wonderful syntax by William Shakespeare. The fact that he uses his syntax to order it in terms of heaven and hell, he puts heaven first. He's literally showing you the chronological downfall of Macbeth in terms of his behaviour and his actions. Heaven obviously linked into our tragic hero of great esteem at the start of this play, as we would expect from Aristotle, tragic Greek hero, if you like. And then hell, which is where he's going to end up for blasphemy and the defying of God, and the punishment that he's going to face. And as is she. Remember that one of her last lines in Act 5 is, his hell is murky. So again, she references eternal punishment, and I suppose the suffering that they both endure because of their ambition, because of aiming too high, because of wanting what isn't theirs. We also get that section about witchcraft celebrates as well, which probably put in the same section as wicked, or I would, in terms of just writing about, you know, similar things concisely. But witchcraft celebrates reminds me of the juggling fiends, and that reference at the end, as if it is a game, as if they are the puppet masters and they are working on Macbeth to get him to do Satan's job, which is to annoy God, isn't it, really, and remove his monarch. And this idea of them celebrating is, I think, almost that moment of acknowledgement that the witches have overpowered him. And I suppose what we can then do when we're talking about the juggling fiends is that I say they juggle with him, don't they? And he acknowledges through the word fiend that they are working for the devil. So the witchcraft celebrates is a fantastic one, because they give him the prophecy, he commits the murder. It's like game over, really, isn't it? In terms of his reign, A, within the play, and B, on the throne. So again, you can be referencing that as well. Witchcraft celebrates. And all of the references to the dagger. Again, not a massive fan of is this the dagger I see before me, just because we tend to not have a great analysis in terms of my own experience of reading essays. But if we're going to reference that, then perhaps we can move across the play to when Macbeth says there's daggers in men's smiles, because actually that's a link to deceptiveness, being deceitful, and then again he's almost, well, he is talking about himself, isn't he, in terms of the serpent as well, and how that deceives Eve. So the daggers in men's smiles can link us to the dagger that we are talking about here, and obviously on a literal level he stabs the king with the dagger, doesn't he? So it is the weapon of choice. To stab the king in his sleep with a dagger as well, I would argue, is a personal killing, because he's going to be right on top of him in that really close space. So imagine again the trauma of that. And we know what the sleep reference does. Not only have I mentioned Macbeth doth murder sleep, but it's mentioned in the speech when he says curtain sleep. And again, any reference to sleep and the inability to sleep is a reference to guilt. It's the removal of someone's innocence and the removal of their peace. So we know that Macbeth, obviously, off the back of this event, will be tormented, as will she. I hope this was useful. You can find loads on my YouTube, Stacey Ray, free, and on my Instagram, again, absolutely loads on there, or you can subscribe to my website, www.staceyray.co.uk. Let me know how you're getting on, and massive good luck, guys.